This week, I think, seeing who's here from my caucus, you can guess higher ed was a major part. Some of you covered the conference yesterday about how we want to change the way we look at higher education. I've spent the past 21 years representing students on, used to be 2, now 1 campus, WSU, and I never once got to vote for no tuition increase or a tuition decrease. And it's sort of like tax cuts. It's probably time that we got to vote for a tax cut, and this time it's a tax cut on the parents and students of the state. So I brought my vice chair of Ways and Means and my education chair to talk about that. I think those that want to raise taxes really, really bad, we're probably disappointed. The revenue forecast wasn't worse today. From what I saw, we have neutral for all practical purposes, which was better than many expected. I think that's good. The fact we got past cutoff, people said that majority coalition wouldn't last through the first day, wouldn't last through the policy cutoffs, wouldn't last through House of Origin cutoff. Happy to say we disappointed them. We are still functioning, and we're hearing House bills now just the way the majority is supposed to. Our chairs are giving hearings and working together really well, and I'll just leave it at that.
Well, today I have Terry Nealey with me. He's our ranking on finance, and we've received all these fine Senate bills, some which aren't getting hearings, and it's amazing to me as you think about what a good job you did hearing all the bills. That, in the House culture, we are not going to hear all ideas. We're only going to pick and choose the ideas that fit our mantra best. So we're trying to see if we can get some more of the bills heard, like some of the workers' comp issues. Even if they're not willing to vote them, they should at least hear them and have the hearings on them with the same respect that they were given over here. Because I think you're hearing most of their bills over here, too. And so I'd like to see that the culture that we have in the Senate kind of waft over to some of our culture that we have in the House. Terry's going to talk to you about the forecast. Gary Alexander's on his way. He can answer any questions on the budget issues around the forecast. I thought the forecast was very favorable. I was pleased. I lost the pool. I was thinking it would be worse. But one of the things that I think is important is as our economy remains flat, it shows you the more emphasis that we have now that we don't have a revenue issue, that we have to do more to get Washington working again, because the more we can do to curb the social economic problems we have with unemployment, the more we can do to build that forecast for the future. And then I thought the $2 billion increase next year I thought was fascinating, because it just proves that we don't need a tax increase this year. So, you want to start, Terry, and then we'll go on.
Okay, well, you folks heard the economic forecast, and I was cautiously optimistic and happy to hear what we did hear. Could have been worse. We expected worse. Also, as I've said, we still have to be very careful going forward. We still have a very fragile economy out there. And as a result of that, we're very concerned about certainty, especially with employers and businesses. And I think they're still waiting in the wings to see really what's going to come forth. And I'm concerned about that. If we raise taxes, that's going to extend that uncertainty. Representative Hunter said it looks like, according to his version, that we're going to have new revenue to meet all these requirements of McCleary and the debt we're currently under. Gary Alexander once he appears, can speak to the budget, but we think that we can go forward without increasing revenue and come up with a good budget that meets those requirements. So I'm optimistic we can do that. But the important thing is if we can go forward with improving and have especially the consumer confidence go up, and that's a continuation of good employment and a positive outcome. A lot of it, of course, is just positive attitude, that if we can gain jobs and keep our economy going strong, that's going to help. I think it will. I mean, I'm from the east side. Agriculture is strong. We've got good crops coming on, good winter for the crops. So that means, of course, more exports, more transportation, et cetera, et cetera. Same thing with Boeing and what's happening over here. That's not slowing down at all. So I'm optimistic that we're going to do better. As a result of that, that's going to be what's important in the future for increasing our tax revenue to the state.
Mark?
Yeah, well,
Which one of you guys
Sure,
want?
I'll just say a few things. It was a pleasure sharing with you our bold new idea to help students with 3% and their families with 3% reduction in tuition last year. We think we had a great plan to finance higher education. As you saw today, we got $2 billion more to spend. That's a 7% increase. I'd like to take $300 million of that $2 billion and put it into higher education. Obviously, we're going to have some funding items above the 7% average, and we're going to have some funding items below the 7% average, and you'll see that as we roll out our budget. And I also thought of telling sort of story today. When you looked at what's happened with the budget, you look at the unease with things at the Washington, D.C. level. And I think it's important discussion as we move forward in the budget process. How much are we and how are we going to finance things off the federal government here? And I'd point to another bill that I have, not outside of the higher education bill, which was my bill to look at what happens if we see a 5% or alternatively a 25% drop in federal government matching funds. What would that do to our state agencies? Because I think the $16.5 trillion in federal debt is a new normal, uncertainty with that money, and we need to be prepared, and that's what that bill would help us do.
Well, I think one of the things that we can all take some pride in is the fact that we're starting to look at really helping the middle-income families of this state, particularly as it relates to higher education. And our K-12 system has made, we put forward reforms and money to invest in K-12. We're trying to close the gap between K-12 and higher education, and one of those difficulties is definitely what it costs to go to higher education. And so with the reduction of 3% in tuition, we're making that more affordable. It's not where I'd like to be, but we certainly can look at the future because now we're turning the future in a positive direction. We also are making sure that we save those programs like the GAP program for, again, our middle-income families and those that have invested in that program by lowering tuition costs. We're actually now putting the GAP program actuarially in a more than 100% funded state, so it's on solid ground and will continue to be that way. I'm very excited about that. It was one of the personal things that I had when I first came into this session, is that we would take care of making sure that that program stayed actuarially sound.
Okay, this one is for Michael and Barbara. Some of us got this response from the schools yesterday when we were asking questions about the higher education proposal you guys outlined yesterday. The schools were saying, well, you know, this isn't really an increase. Even though it's $300 million more, you have to take a look at our maintenance level, which includes salary increases. And then, of course, you have the tuition reduction. And when you take a look at all of that, actually it becomes a wash. So I was hoping that you might be able to talk a little bit about that.
Well, you know, we look at the frame of reference that higher ed has been in, and I would like to see higher education funding substantially above this level. What's the reality, though? While we've been in the minority, those folks controlling the state budget have substantially defunded higher education, and not Olympia cuts, they've done real cuts. We've come forward with a reversal of that, a step in the right direction, and certainly a tremendous improvement over what higher education has seen previously. So some of it's your frame of reference and what expectations are in this budget. You know, I would say that if we don't have a vibrant public discussion about the importance of higher education and what the challenges are from tuition levels over $11,000 and the amount of debt that our students are building up because of that, if that's not a vibrant and bold public discussion about what our state can afford there, higher education will lose again in this budget discussion. That's what it's been in the last 2 years. And what I would remind you, and as the institutions of higher education know, not only is this a funding level decision today, it's a reform to take higher education out of the back of the budget where it's very, very easy to cut, at the end of the day, and putting it out front and saying there's an obligation to fund higher education. So I think this is really a strong statement. I've heard from a lot of folks already publicly about it, and you heard from the students. You know, they really think tuition is too high. I'll remind everybody here, when I went to WSU, it was $3,000. It's now $11,000. A highly subsidized state-controlled model is good for our economy, and that's what we got to get back towards as we work towards a 50-50 split.
And can I add one? I just want to add one little bit to that. Since we've had one-party control, we've had a 60% increase in tuition for higher education. And plus, this is the first bill I've ever seen that actually has some reforms in higher education that brings some of these agencies and these universities into some kind of model that gives us some accountability measures. Sorry.
That's all right. This brings up a broader notion of maintenance level budgets, and there's some of this discussion in the forecast meetings today. As a caucus, do you agree with the notion of a maintenance level budget, or do you think that's in some ways a fabrication?
Well, I think we go back to, Jason wrote about it just the other day, or just today, I think, about Governor Locke when he went to the priorities of government, that baseline budgeting wasn't working, that we needed to move ahead on reforms that would get us there. If I used baseline budgeting to operate my farm, I'd be broke. I have to go back and design what it is my farm's going to do every year, or I'm gone and 125 years of the Schoesler family's gone.
I mean, the Democrats argue that maintenance level is basically inflation.
No, that's what got us in
trouble. No, doing business.
I disagree with that, Andrew, because
right.
That's what got us in trouble.
Gary's had a zero-based budgeting. We've tried to use zero-based budgeting in the House for years. That should be the way we define our parameters.
So we represent constituents and voters. If you go to a town hall and try to explain what a maintenance level budget is, you get blank stares. People expect us and want us to budget the same way they do around their kitchen table, which is how much money did we spend today, how much money are you expecting to spend tomorrow? And so I think we have an ability here, when we speak in those terms that the public wants us to speak and understand, to put a frame of reference that provides greater transparency and understanding for the folks. I think it's equally fair to talk about maintenance, certainly amongst you guys, because it is funding, it is under current law. But, you know, we make laws here. So when we start afresh, and if you start to do that with a zero-based function, I think you get both the best story. So I'd ask you and the media just to report both numbers. I think that's an appropriate thing to do.
Okay. I'm coming in late on this, but the $300 million that was mentioned yesterday as your injection into higher education, where's the $300 million coming from? What's going to get cut? What's
Mostly arguing over the rate of growth in programs. I mean, I think we've said it time and time again, there is approximately $2 billion more money. And some programs are not going to grow as much as they would like when they see the budget. But that's the way any other business readjusts their business plan. We can't be any different.
okay? Got about a half hour ago, asked Ross Hunter a question coming from your point of view, and he said when you're talking about the $2 billion extra in for the upcoming biennium, he says a lot of it gets wiped out because of inflation growth. There's about a zillion different factors that gobble up that extra,
you know, if you're really,
$2 billion.
yeah, sure, but if you're really committed to raising taxes, you like that. But if you're not, you look at it, inflation is historically low. And if you can't go back into the 2/3 of or half of the budget that's not education related and find a small percentage of savings, efficiencies, you really aren't doing your job of scrubbing the budget very well.
Do you run the risk of simplifying the budget, though? I mean, this state has $33 billion budget. It's got all these accounts. It's got double entry bookkeeping. It's got all this federal money coming in. And yet, you all talk about it like we're sitting around the kitchen table looking at our what comes and goes on revenue. I mean, there's a simplification factor that gets too far, doesn't it?
No, it really doesn't. The way things are working in the Senate, I don't think it works this way in the House, but Jim Hargrove is sitting down with Andy Hill a lot like a family does, or a business making tough decisions. They've got Sharon Nelson, and they've got Michael Baumgartner there, working on those hard decisions together. They're spending phenomenal hours, Jim, trying to come to the right conclusion of where our state budget should go. And that's why it's not, if it was simple, we'd have the budget out a week ago and just make a minor correction for this. But it's a complicated document.
We had it out a week ago.
Congratulations.
Are you struggling to get the nonpartisan staff to structure it in that way?
No, I think that Andy and Jim Hargrove are working really well, utilizing all of the staff. I mean, I have to say there's good committee services staff, we have great staff, and I'm sure Jim Hargrove has confidence in his staff that they can call on all of the staff to find the best solutions to the problem we have today.
Did you, I guess to Representative DeBolt, why not? There was some fear that the revenue was going to be, you know, a much worse kind of outcome today, 200 million worse, 250 million, something like that. That it's actually slightly better or flat, whatever you want to call it. Does that sort of make you even more convinced that we don't need new revenue?
I think so. I think and if you look at the go forward, it just shows that our economy is recovering slowly, but it is moving forward. And it puts more impetus around getting people back to work to lower the caseload issues that we have. But I don't think we need new taxes. This is not the time to do it. Right as consumer confidence is coming back, the last thing you want to do is destroy that by putting more burden and more taxes on the families of Washington. And we have the money to do it.
And the revenue forecast today kind of buttresses that.
It does.
Well, and if I might, it's not also the time to take that money and think, we've got all this money now we can spend, and go out and create new programs or new obligations or make new promises that we know we can't fulfill for the future. It's a time to make sure that we're being conservative with our budget and we're looking at everything, because now we have to carry forward 4 years. So we have to have a balanced budget for 4 years. And we want to make sure that it's going to be that way for quite some time, and that our investments are sound investments for the future.
And you know, I just say on this question of what's maintenance and what's baseline and how you report that, I think it would be normal that you have some folks that haven't been the ones in charge doing things a little different. And I think we should try to make it as understandable as possible to the folks back home and around the kitchen table. If you saw how me and my brothers sometimes argue around the kitchen table, that's a little bit what it's like sometimes in those budget meetings. But I do think we're working towards a process, and the more transparency we have, better understanding people have, the better the state of Washington will be.
Thanks, Jerry.
Jerry. No, Jerry's turn.
Hi, Senator Schoesler, I just want to ask, Senator Hill has said at the forecast that the goal is not to do a budget without extending existing taxes or new taxes. Goal doesn't sound quite as strong as DeBolt. Can you do the budget, and will you guys put out a budget without any new or extension of existing taxes?
Yes. I mean, I think we've been...
no loopholes, no new revenue.
We've been very clear from day one, whether it's Senator Tom, myself, or other members, that we said, we disagree with the governor extending the B&O and the beer tax when it's supposed to expire is a tax increase. The people that are expecting those breaks, whether it's the chiropractor or dentist or CPA on Main Street, they're expecting their taxes to go down. This past week, I talked to one of the beer distributors in town. Their sales went down $10 million from this distributor during this tax increase. They handle macro brews. They expect their taxes to go down. We expect to keep that promise.
Isn't it odd, though, to talk on the one hand about what people expect, and it would be a tax increase because they expect their taxes to go down, and then talk on the other hand about programs and say it's not a spending, it's a spending increase even though it's not what people expected. It seems like those are two...
Well, I think it's a really novel concept around here to keep your word. He told the taxpayers that it's temporary. Temporary really means temporary.
And people build their budgets and book their business and their economic growth. So if you look at the capital expenditures that they have for their business, they are probably looking at an uptick in their business right now, and that they're probably saying, okay, I got this money coming in, I'm going to have the ability to invest this much more, or I can bring my product price down to give me a better price break to compete with other people in other areas. So I think that's the premise behind this is the reason a lot of these things were put into place. This one was something that these people got caught in an agreement to raise taxes, and they were told it was temporary to sell it to the voters and to make it more palatable. So if you back off that and break your word, it was a tax increase at one point, so it'll be a tax increase again.
Okay, last week Representative Alexander said there was one tax exemption that he would support closing. And Mark, I was wondering if your caucus would agree on this one. That would be the telecom tax exemption.
I think reforming that to solve the court problem is important. What we had here was inequity. The court ruled against us. Reforming that to be consistent and revenue neutral is a pretty good goal. I mean, there's some problems in...
We're going to lose.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to lose the court case. And there's inequities in telecom as the industry has changed. Just since I've been here, I think how much telecom has changed. Some reforms there probably are very realistic.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so it sounds like that's one that you can support.
It's a reform of the system that is broken and the courts have gone against us on.
And I think it's important to understand, though, when a tax exemption isn't working or is no longer needed, I don't think anybody up here is saying that it's something that's a sacred cow just because it's in place at one point that you can't do away with at another point. Whether it's here to help a business move forward, whatever this is, if it's not working, then it's not working. But when they are working, or they were promised to people that they would be temporary, to go back on that is inappropriate. The thing that was neat about this is the reason this works so well with the 2/3 that no longer exists is that if you truly had a good case for a tax break that was no longer working, you could go and get 2/3 of the legislature to support that. We've proved that. We've done that in the past. But by making it now a different vote to raise taxes, you take out the dialogue away from everybody.
What are you guys looking at for ending fund balance? What do you think is the right number, minimum number at this stage?
I don't think we've arrived on that number yet, Jerry. I mean, we're still formulating that budget. What Senator Hargrove thinks is right ending fund balance, what Senator Hill sells to the majority caucus, I think that number's still being researched.
The past year's a number when it was several hundred million. Your caucuses sort of thought.
We found out, yeah, but we found out that wasn't enough sometimes.
So since it's all coming out of that $2 billion.
Well, you realize from the very beginning, we put 1% into the rainy day fund off the top. So we're adding to the rainy day fund. We didn't have that rainy day fund years ago, or the discipline to put that money away. Now the Constitution requires it. So we'll have to work together with hopefully the other side to find an agreed upon number. And we haven't had a final discussion on what that number is going to look like.
But you expect to use the rainy day fund?
No.
You will not use the rainy day fund?
That's not, our plan is not to use rainy day fund, but thank goodness the voters gave us that rainy day fund. If we didn't have that rainy day fund, think of the mess we'd be in.
7% increase in revenue is not raining.
No, it's actually clearing up a bit. Partly cloudy.
Well, just now they said it's not 7%, it's 6.6%.
Oh,
Should
sorry.
that be the figure we use?
Okay, so it's partly cloudy with some morning fog.
What sort of McCleary target are you looking at? I've got 800 million in the House, Republicans, 1.4 billion from the House Democrats. What's the...
You've seen the range. You've seen the range. We haven't settled exactly on what that range is. You know what's really great about the budget this session, John? Unlike past sessions, we're arguing about how much more we're going to spend on K-12, and we're debating how much we're going to spend on higher ed. This is a debate we haven't had in years. Isn't it great? Really great to be. We're debating the increase, not the cuts. That's a wonderful state to be in.
Okay, but,
Are you guys in agreement to fund the 732 teacher pay hikes, so you don't have to fight about that?
I don't think we're in agreement on that.
The governor's going to release his, I guess, recommendations, not a full budget, but his recommendations.
We would love to see a full budget, though.
Pardon?
We'd love to see a full budget from the governor.
If his recommendations, or his full budget, if they get around to that, comes to the Senate with any extension of temporary taxes or tax loopholes, is it dead on arrival?
Well, I think we've been pretty clear that temporary means temporary. we've been pretty clear about that. Senator Tom and I started talking about that in editorial boards in December, and I don't think we've wavered on it.
Okay, but,
And it's hard to kill a talking point, by the way. So it can't be dead on arrival if it's just a talking point. If it's an actual document that has numbers and a budget in it, then we can have that discussion. But if it's just highlights, we can't kill his highlights. He gets to have those.
Okay, but loopholes. Inslee is, I don't know, a few $100 million worth of loopholes.
That's his
Would
committee.
you consider, are all of them off the table as far as you're concerned?
So that's one of the experts.
Yeah, Terry's our head of finance.
I'm ranking on finance, and those issues are still definitely being discussed. Representative Carlisle and I have had some discussions about those issues, and I think it's accurate to say that we're proceeding in our committee meetings and our ranking meetings very carefully as to which ones we're going to analyze and which ones we're not.
I think you guys met with the governor yesterday, is that?
Governor came to our caucus today. First time in my 8 years that I remember a formal visit from a governor in the Senate.
Gregoire did it both years.
Yeah, Gregoire
Yeah,
came
she
to ours
did.
too.
Well, it's a rare visit for a Democrat governor to come to my caucus. It was welcome.
What did you learn from that visit? Or what,
You
what did you talk
know,
about?
nothing new.
Basketball.
Nothing new. Oh, we did talk about basketball. But aside from that, I think you've heard all of the ideas that the governor has presented to date. Nothing earth-shattering. And we couldn't leak any secrets anyway.
Okay.
What did you talk about at the meeting?
We talked about all of the issues that you've talked about, the budgets, education, right down the line. We talked about the basics the governor's talked about with you.
On the
Reproductive Parity Act on the gun?
I don't think, he didn't spend any time in our caucus on those issues.
Neither one.
No.
On the Senate side, it wasn't clear on this, are you open to looking at tax breaks or not?
We haven't gone down that road.
Does that mean you won't, or, I understand no new taxes, no extension of taxes, but when it comes to tax preferences, is that off the table or not?
No one's made a case for one that needs to be yet.
Except for Sprint.
Well, except for fixing the Supreme Court. Senator Tom has a very interesting analogy, having been in the other camp. They had 32 Senate Democrats, and no two-thirds requirement or the ability to suspend it with a simple majority, and they couldn't get anywhere on any of those with 32 Democrats, and instead they went to tobacco, pop, beer, B&O, the old reliables.
So, when we're talking nomenclature here over what's a budget increase versus decrease, well, what's a needed exemption to spur an industry and what's a loophole? In Ways and Means, we've heard several new exemptions come up, supported by both parties. If you remember when Senator Murray was advocating for the dance floor exemption and the restaurant exemption, he talked about how some loopholes are bad, but those that are some that are important in my district. So, it's in the eye of the beholder, a lot of these issues. And so whenever somebody talks about a loophole, I think they need to talk about a reduction in tax rate over an arbitrary B&O rate and actually specify what that is and whose money that really is, and then make a case for it. Last year, we voted to raise a tax on a revenue-neutral basis on out-of-state banks. So we're willing to look at these things if a case can be made.
I sponsored that bill in the House, if you remember correctly. So.
For closing loopholes to actually be effective, you got to do about, at least a couple $100 million worth, and most loopholes are like, $5 million, $3 million. Essentially, for a loophole fix-it plan to work, you would have to target a whole bunch or have a master plan on how to tackle those. Are you willing to look at $200 million worth of loopholes from the aspect of fixing the budget?
But if Democrats couldn't find $200 million in bad tax exemptions, how could we?
How about the Bracken decision? What do you think about whether that's a core fix that needs to happen, or whether that's would really be a tax increase?
Well, I'll respond to that. That to me is not a tax issue regards to exemptions. Of course, that's another Supreme Court ruling that ruled against the Department of Revenue. And if we don't do anything about it, it'll be about a $160 million hit to our budget. So Representative Carlisle has dropped a bill to basically change that, to go back retroactively, to fix it, so to speak, so that there would not be a hit to the state. There's some legal issues in that, I feel. And so we have just begun discussing that issue. If it does go back retroactively before 2005, it's a $130 million hit to the state. If it goes forward from 2005, and that's when the decision was made back in 2005 that implemented it, then it's about a $22 million hit. So the retroactivity is a huge part of the issue.
If you fix this, though, some people could say that that's a tax increase. I'm wondering, is that something that you view as a problem?
I see it as a possible problem. I think there's some legal issues in regards to the retroactivity part of it. However, there was a request for an AG opinion. The AG opinion said that, yes, on occasions in the past, that the legislature has come back and passed bills that did reach back retroactively to fix those problems, and they were upheld. So I can't tell you at this juncture how that's going to turn out, because we really have not sat down to discuss it yet in our Finance Committee.
I think, you know, Terry's answer as an attorney and the ranking member, I'm going to listen to Terry. His background is very strong in that area, and I'll follow Terry on that. Who hasn't gotten to ask a question? Rachel or some of the others have a question? We've let the boys.
I have a budget-related question for you. Has there been any discussion in your caucus about two of the bills that passed out of the House, the Voting Rights Act, and then the so-called DREAM Act? Any support for that?
Okay, Voting Rights Act, this is Senator Roach's committee. I haven't visited with the senator, and we haven't had a caucus discussion. The DREAM Act is in Senator Bailey's committee.
Right.
So what thoughts are, or what are the chances of either of those bills in your mind?
Well, the only thing that's in my committee is 1870. In 1817, we're still working out the logistics on a hearing, possible hearing.
Is it likely to get a hearing, or?
I can't answer that definitively at the moment. We're still working out logistics.
What logistics would you have to work out?
A lot.
Like what?
Anything different from any other type of bill here?
Well, there are some other influencing elements around that whole bill, and some logistics on just being able to get through all of our agenda that we already have.
And we're making, you know, we're higher ed has really suffered in the previous budgets. And it is going to take a concerted effort to make sure that we improve situations for working families and college students here. I mean, this is a big deal what we're trying to do in higher education. And it's very, very important that as we build momentum, there are a lot of issues out there the legislature can discuss, and certainly particular issues are intense interest to you folks, but you know, we're trying to concentrate on good jobs, good education, healthy economy, right, and a sustainable budget. And part of that's providing this bold new plan for higher education funding, and various other topics can distract from that discussion at times. So that's some of the logistics we're trying to
Okay,
work
but
through.
the DREAM Act is higher ed. It's
well, you know, you read was it the TNT editorial that talked about this as an important discussion, but maybe not this year. And you know, you can't do everything at the same time. So I really want, again, this is a remarkable idea that we're going to reduce record tuition increases for students. And we need to really try to push this thing forward and build consensus on this. And so that's part of our real focus in higher education.
So regardless of the logistics of whether either of those bills are going to get a hearing or not, just the three of you personally, I mean, do you feel like these are bills that are not a priority for you personally this session, regardless of whether you know how the caucus stands or not?
Personally, I would like to learn more about all of them. I visited with groups that were on campus last week and got a partial explanation, but I don't have all of the answers to know what to do with them as an individual senator, let alone the Republican leader.
And I would say that they're important issues to learn more about. But you know, when you're sitting at 25 members that have a wide variety of views on other issues, you know, you look at the things that you unify over, and the really things that you got to focus on. You know, balanced budgets, improving education and jobs, and that's really where, you know, I would like our focus to be and remain. And not to say these other issues aren't important; they really are. But you can only do so much in legislative session.
Is it possible, since the Senate Ways and Means didn't have anything to do today or tomorrow or was canceled, you might want to re-refer it to a committee?
Senate Ways and Means is working more than you can believe. On, I mean, the amount of hours that Andy, myself, Jim, and Sharon are putting in with nonpartisan staff is remarkable. It's as intense an effort as anything I saw at the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad in the middle of the surge.
Jerry, if there wasn't major policy attached to those bills, they'd be in Ways and Means. But there is a lot of major policy to consider, and that's why they go to a policy committee first. That's the normal way of doing business here.
It has no price tag. No, it's not funded.
Any other questions?
Well, I'm going to get back to Ways and Means discussions. Thanks, guys.
No comment on